Hey everyone, this time on Tim Talks Audio, we're checking out the newest plugin from Mixland Audio, and that's Tilt. So we've worked with Mixland Audio before. Jesse Ray and the guys over at Kive Audio have teamed up to create a new plugin, Tilt. And it's kind of what you think it is. It's a Tilt EQ, but you can also separate out the top end and the low end if you're just looking for some really nice shelve EQs, plus there's some tube saturation. So let's dive into the DAW and mess around with Tilt. So here it is. This is Tilt. On the left-hand side, you'll see the low frequencies, and on the right-hand side, you'll see the high frequencies. This is a very, very simple tool that we have where we can adjust the top end and the bottom end and just the balance of those two with one plugin. And really we can do that with one control. If you come down to either the high or low, and in the center at 12 o'clock, there's no adding or subtracting or attenuation of any of these frequencies. If I grab just the high end while they're linked with the link button on bottom, which is the default, and maybe I just want everything a little bit brighter and it's a little too dark, what I can do is I can increase the highs and the lows will come down proportionally. Same thing if we go the opposite direction and want to darken our track, and we can also bring up those lows. So I'm going to reset this back to 0. And then along top, you'll see two different frequency selectors. This is the starting point of the shelves, whether it's for the low or high frequencies. The low frequencies has 20 hertz, 60 hertz, 100, and 200. And the high frequencies start at 1K, then it jumps up to 8K, 16K, and 40K. This is for that really, really top-end air. And yes, it's 40K, but it has a really shallow or really relaxed slope on this Tilt EQ. So even at 40K, you'll hear it, and it's really going to add some nice shimmer to your top end. Then this plugin also has tube style saturation in the middle, and that's what the grit control is. The grit control is how much of that tube saturation you're going to get within your signal. If you don't do any EQing with the high or low band, you can just use this as a saturator to get more of that tube style sound. But this is at the end of the circuit, so whatever you're doing with your EQ will affect how it saturates those tubes. If you're not doing anything, it's just the signal going in is going to saturate your tubes. But if you kind of give yourself like a nice high-end shelve and you reduce your lows, you're going to have more harmonics towards the top end. The EQ comes first and the saturation is after. It's really simple. There's not a lot of controls on this, but let's get into the important thing. How does it sound? Right now, I have Tilt on my mix bus. So let's do this and we'll turn it on. And I'm just going to mess around with everything linked. I'm not going to use any grit right now. And I'm just going to go with the default settings. 200 hertz and everything below that, and 40K and everything above that. But it does stretch down into the audible frequencies. You'll hear this nice top-end shimmer. So let's go crazy. I'll push the highs all the way up, and then I'll drop them all the way down, leaving everything linked. You'll hear the low end basically disappear, and then come back and be extraordinarily boomy, so get ready for that. So there you go. That's with both the top end and the bottom end linked. But like we said before, the link button on bottom gives us two separate, independently controlled bands. So if you maybe don't want to mess with your bottom end, unlink it, and in Studio One, you can double click on a control and it'll put it back to its default setting. Now we can just affect the high end, and listen here because I'm going to leave it on 40K and just affect what's going on up here so you can hear that top end shimmer I was just talking about. So as we were messing around with our top end, I changed the frequency selector and I went all the way down to 1K, but that brought my guitars too nasally and too far forward. So I just bumped it back to 8K and everything above that, and it adds this nice presence and top end shimmer that we liked. But we can still hear that with 16K and 40K. And it's the same thing for the bottom end. Maybe you need some extra oomph. You can go all the way down to 20, and you may not hear this, especially if right now you're watching this on a phone or you're watching this on like a computer. If you listen on some good headphones or you listen in your studio, you'll hear this 20 hertz bump that I'm about to do happen. So there's definitely a lot going on, and it does stretch up above 20 hertz. Like I said before, this is a very gentle slope on these shelves, so it's going to stretch up higher into the different octaves that are above it or below it. Like we said, 40K, it comes down a bit because of that really gentle slope. Same thing for the low frequencies as well. But what we haven't gotten into yet is the grit control. So we're still on our mix bus right now, and I'm just going to push grit so you can hear this tube style saturation, and it's going across our whole mix right now. This might be something you want to do, not as extreme as we're about to, but if you need some extra saturation in your mix to beef everything up, this might be the way to go. Let's take a listen. So we went extreme, and you can get some really gnarly sounds out of the tube saturation. And you heard, because after we kind of settled it down and just got a little bit of saturation, this is after our EQ. So when we messed with our low and our high frequencies, which are not linked, it changes how it saturates and how it pushes into those tubes. And you can see them glowing in the user interface, and that just tells you that you have the grit engaged. If you bring this all the way down, you'll see the tubes turn off. It's kind of a visual indicator for you. And we're just messing around with stuff on our mix bus. I went ahead and threw this onto my drum bus, my bass, and my guitar bus. And sure, let's say the settings on our mix bus, that's what we want right now. Let's go over to our drums. And instead of doing the EQ that we can see here, I'll just reset everything and we'll get some saturation on our drums. I do have some tape emulation going on earlier than this, but we're just going to give ourselves a little bit of grit in our drums to saturate them a bit more. So there we go. We get a little extra bite from our snare drum and a little presence of our kick. The top end comes in real nice because of the saturation and the harmonics. Just a little bit of grit on our drum bus goes a long way. And we haven't even touched the EQ here. Now we're going to go ahead and switch over to our bass. Again, this is at the end of my chain because I just want to show you some stuff you can do. Right now I have it in bypass, and we'll listen to just our bass, and then after a little bit, I'll kick it in. I've added some high end up at 16K, which you're probably thinking, why are you doing that much on your bass? But there is presence up there on a bass guitar, especially a distorted one like this. And we also have a little cut at 60 hertz. We're just making room for our kick drum, which I have living underneath my bass for this mix. We don't have any grit going on right now because I have that all handled earlier in the chain. So with the tilt EQ on and no grit on our bass channel, we're getting some extra presence and it's poking that bass guitar out just a little bit more. So it's kind of helping. I like it, and it's making room for our kick drum. So those low frequencies aren't competing either. Last but not least, we'll go to our guitar bus, and you can see I have a very similar kind of thing, and maybe in here, these are already distorted guitars, maybe we'll add a little extra tube grit as well. But let's take a listen to Tilt on our guitar bus. So there we go. We are getting a little bit of a volume bump, but easily enough, I can just go to my bus here and drop my fader maybe 2 dB to compensate for that volume change that we're getting with tilt on our guitar bus. And I did make an adjustment earlier. I had it at 1K, so it was really nosy and pokey again, but then I just bumped it up to 8K and brought a little bit of that top end bite to our guitars, and I cleaned up about 100 hertz and everything below because we don't really need that in distorted guitars anyway. Well, in this tuning, in this song. You can mess around with that as you need to in your productions. So let's go ahead and listen to before and after with tilt on all of the different things we did. So our mix bus, guitar bus, bass guitar, and our drum bus. Here's the before. And here's after. So there you go. There is Tilt from Mixland Audio. You can pick up your copy if you use the link in the description below with the price of $29.99. It's a great price for a great tool, whether you want to use it for its tilt functionality or its saturation or both. Again, I want to thank the guys over at Mixland and Kive for one, putting this thing together and for sending it over so that we can play around with it, listen to it, and I can show you guys how it works. That's all for now. If you found anything informative, please like and share the video. For booking information, check out timflansbaum.com. And if you have a question, ask it in the comments and I'll answer it in a future video. Thanks for watching.